Without WW1, would the United States still become the superpower that shaped and ultimately won World War II? To answer that, we must walk through a world that never existed, but could have. A world where America's rise to power isn't guaranteed. A world where Germany, Britain, Russia, and Japan evolve under entirely different pressures. A world where industrial revolutions, naval races, and colonial ambitions unfold without the catastrophic reset of 1914. This is not simply a story of alternative events. It is a story of alternative forces: industry, culture, politics, economics, geopolitics, the deep currents that determine which nations rise and which fall. And in this world, America's path is far from inevitable. The first question: what does the world look like without WW1? To understand America's role in WW2, we must first imagine a global order with no Great War. 4 empires that collapsed in our timeline still stand in theirs. 1. The German Empire, powerful, industrial, expanding. 2. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, fragile but preserved. 3. The Ottoman Empire, weakened but unbroken. 4. The Russian Empire, Tsarist, repressive but intact, and with no Russian Revolution, no Bolshevism, no Soviet Union, the entire ideological shape of the 20th century changes. Meanwhile, Britain and France remain global colonial giants, unexhausted by war, financially stable, militarily confident. Japan continues modernizing at extreme speed, with no checks on its expansion in East Asia. And the United States? In 1914, America is not a superpower. It is rich, it is growing, but it is still regional, not global. It has no desire to police the world. It has no experience fighting major powers. Its military is small, modest, almost complacent. World War I, in our real history, is the crucible that transforms America from a large nation into a global force. Without it, the U.S. remains a trading giant, not a world leader. So, if WW1 never happens, America enters the 1930 with no tradition of global commitments, no large navy, no massive industrial military complex, no political culture of intervention, no alliances, and no psychological shock that pushes it onto the world stage. Which leads us to the next question. Could the United States still become the dominant power of World War II if it never had the First World War as a stepping stone? The second question: does WW2 even happen without WW1? This is where the story shifts. World War II, as we know it, is born directly from the aftermath of WW1. German humiliation, economic collapse, rise of Hitler, spread of fascism, revenge politics, colonial instability, power vacuums. If WW1 never occurs, the conditions that created Hitler never form. Germany doesn't face crippling reparations. The Weimar Republic never exists. Hyperinflation never happens. Radicalism never dominates. Instead, Germany remains a proud, powerful, ambitious empire, authoritarian, industrial, confident, and competitive. Not democratic, not peaceful, but not humiliated. Japan, still aggressive, still imperial, still hungry for territory, especially with an untouched British and French colonial system blocking its ambitions. Russia remains Tsarist, repressive, unstable, always one crisis away from collapse, but still one of the world's largest land powers. Britain and France remain wealthy colonial overlords with far more global reach than they had after WW1. So even without WW1, the world still has imperial rivalries, military competition, rising nationalism, resource struggles, technological leaps in weapons, colonial tensions, and a dangerous balance of power. Meaning, WW2 could still happen, but it would look nothing like the one we know. There would be no Nazis, no fascism as we recognize it, no Soviet Union, no Versailles, no League of Nations failure, no Great Depression triggered by wartime economics. Instead, WW2 could emerge from a Pacific conflict between Japan and the United States, a European struggle between Germany and Britain, a collapse of the Russian Empire, a colonial war in Asia, a naval arms race spiraling out of control, economic rivalry between industrial giants. So the key becomes, in this alternate WW2, does America emerge as a decisive superpower or remain a secondary player? The third question: would America still industrialize enough to dominate WW2? World War I turbocharged American industry. Massive steel output, military standardization, assembly line refinement, shipbuilding explosion, aircraft innovation, the birth of corporate military partnership, the rise of Fordism, mass employment of skilled labor, financial dominance after Europe collapsed. Without WW1, Europe never collapses. Britain and France remain wealthy. Germany stays competitive. Japan keeps modernizing. Global markets stay balanced. America becomes rich, but shared rich, not dominant rich. And without wartime contracts, American industry does not scale rapidly. The military remains tiny. Shipbuilding remains coastal. Aircraft development remains experimental. By 1,939 inches this alternate world, America is wealthy. America is innovative. America is industrial. But America is not the manufacturing titan capable of producing a plane every 5 minutes, a tank every hour, a ship every day. So, in a hypothetical WW2 without WW1, the U.S. would enter the conflict far weaker. But the story doesn't end there, because America has one advantage no nation can erase: size, resources, population, geographic security, oceans as shield walls. Even without WW1, America would still grow industrially, slower but still rising, which leads to the most important question of all, the final question. In a WW2 without WW1, does America become the deciding force? To answer this, we must examine 4 scenarios. Scenario 1. A German-British war in Europe. Without WW1, Germany never collapses. It grows stronger each decade. Britain remains powerful but aging. A clash becomes almost inevitable. In such a war, America might support Britain, but carefully, slowly, reluctantly, not as a global leader, but as an arms supplier and financier. America may help decide the war, but would not dominate it. Superpower status? Unlikely. Scenario 2. A Japanese-American war in the Pacific. This is the most likely alternate WW2 spark. Japan still seeks resources. America still controls the Philippines. Tension still rises. Without WW1, America's Pacific fleet is smaller, older, less modern. Japan grows bolder, possibly more aggressive. A Pacific war still happens, but the U.S. doesn't start as the overwhelming force. Still, America's size and industry eventually crush Japan. Superpower status? Possible but regional, not global. Scenario 3. A Russian imperial collapse, triggering multi-power conflict. With no Bolshevik revolution, the Russian Empire remains unstable. Eventually, it fractures, inviting intervention from Germany, Japan, and Britain. America stays distant, not a major participant. Superpower status? No. Scenario 4. A global conflict where America stays neutral at first, but becomes the final arbiter. This mirrors real WW2 not in cause, but in pattern. If Europe and Asia exhaust themselves in war, America, untouched, wealthy, secure, becomes the deciding factor when it finally enters. This is the only scenario where America becomes a true superpower, but it requires Europe weakening itself, Japan overstretching, no rival industrial power on America's scale, global reliance on U.S. credit and supplies. Would this still happen without WW1? Yes, but decades later, slower, and with far less certainty. The answer, the one line that defines this what if. Without World War I, the United States could become a superpower in World War II. But it is not guaranteed, and if it did, the rise would be slower, harder, and far less dominant. WW1 was the catalyst. the accelerant. The event that pushed America from isolation to involvement, from regional power to global force, from industrial nation to industrial empire. Without it, America still rises, but the world around it also rises. Germany stays strong, Britain stays wealthy, Japan stays ambitious, Russia stays vast. Colonies stay under control. No one collapses early. America becomes one great power, not the great power, which means, in a world without WW1, the United States enters WW2 not as a superpower, but as one competitor among many, and only becomes dominant if the world tears itself apart first. That is the uncomfortable truth. The rise of American power was not inevitable. It was the product of tragedy, collapse, destruction, a world shattered so violently that the only nation left standing tall enough to rebuild it was the United States. Remove WW1, and the 20th century becomes a different world, one where America still rises, but never with the same speed, the same momentum, or the same global dominance. History remembers the superpower America became, but rarely does it remember the event that made it possible. Sometimes the greatest empires are not built by victory, but by the ruins left behind when others fall.